Board games, board games is what we're talking about. Board games, board games. I'm not gonna shout. I am starting off this streaming with a little bit of singing, and Jess and Dina there are bringing some talk about board game marketing. We'll talk about press releases. This is something you can. Sorry. Help me out. Releases, pieces. This is something to help you from going into pieces. This is something to keep you whole. And you might find it wonderful. Board games and marketing is what we're talking about. Board games and marketing. I'm not gonna shout. Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, whatever you are, it is episode 344 of Busy Beats and Board Game Blether. And I am streaming at 10 a.m. UK time for the next 56 days, and then I'm taking a wee break. And today we've got the delightful Dina. Hello, Dina.
Down there.
And Jessica Metheringham, or Jess. And so today what's going to happen is that, as we do pretty much every couple of weeks, Dina is going to be chatting about, giving us a couple of wee tips. Dina's been doing some brilliant stuff on Facebook, teaching people about TikTok and teaching people a couple of auditing tips. And maybe we'll get some auditing tips. We'll have a wee chat with Jess about like little bits of a case study about your successful press release that you've sent off. This press release, how did it work, how was it worded, and maybe we'll chat a wee bit more about press releases in general before answering any more questions that people have about marketing. And then we'll finish up in about 90 minutes to 2 hours. So if that sounds like good time, then please do stick around. And so let's get on with the show and talk about recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. So what have been some of your recent highlights? Jess?
Oh, I don't know. Board games wise or just general life wise?
Anything.
Everything.
And hello, Alex. It is lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us. And
general. Oh, hello. Yep. Hi, everyone.
I was going to say, what is the last board game you enjoyed? What's been some of the successes that you've had? Anything that you're wanting to share?
Board game wise, I think the last game I enjoyed was Mountain Goats, which was which is one of the very small ones, which I think are from Board Game Tables. But they had a set of 3 of them, which were on Kickstarter. They got delivered just after Christmas, I think. Mountain Goats was one of them, and it was really good fun. Really interesting, really quick. Takes about So me and my other half play it together. It takes about 20 minutes or something. Really nice, really quick, really fun. Tiny box, tiny box. And so that has been a great highlight for us recently. And non-gaming highlights, we're trying to move house, and we think we're going to be successful. So it's one of those things where life has been taken over by things. So hopefully when we move house, it'll be a bigger house, and we might have space to do to spread out a bit more games, bigger table.
Oh, lovely. Nice. And I just checked it up, and yep, indeed, Mountain Goats is from Board Game Tables, and that looks lovely. There's none of the images that I'm meant to be using, so I'm just going to leave that there in case someone wants to check it out. A quick hello to Timmy. It is lovely to see the eternally awoken one. I hope you are generally okay. And hello to Yoda. Lots of love. So let's move on to some of your recent highlights, Dina. And of course, anyone in the chat, feel free to share.
Yeah, I recently got a game that I backed on Kickstarter recently, so that was kind of cool. It's based on Gin Rummy, which I actually haven't played, so I had to figure it out. It's called Dragons Wild and has a bunch of little cool, very quirky, weird horror/dinosaur dragon things. My kid is not quite sure what they're supposed to be, so he just calls them the things. Which I think is hilarious. But one of them is like a mermaid dragon, and he's just absolutely loving them. But trying to explain a game that I'm not quite sure how it's supposed to be played was was fun because we got to learn it together.
That sounds great. A mermaid
Yeah.
dragony thing. I want one.
Right? Who wouldn't?
Yeah.
Oh man. And Alex says, Bez can teach you rummy. I'm sure she'd be delighted. So
I love
this
rummy
is
as well.
no, there's a reason that there's a winky face. Because I've gone on record as saying that I'm just not a fan of. I perceive there to be a lack of agency. It's a bit too luck based for my personal tastes. Like it. I actually played it last night. We played 4 hands of rummy, interestingly, but it's very much okay, I'm trying to maximize the time that I spend reading books here and being with my family before I head back down in a week and a bit. And so, yeah, last night we played a game of my choice, and we've played a game of my choice for, quite a few days. So it felt, okay, I know you really want to play this. Let's play it, even though it's not one of my top 200 games. But I don't know where it should be. I'm sure I could think of probably 1,000 games that I'd prefer to play. But anyway, that's besides the point. But anyway, it's like something that allows us to spend time together, and that's the most important thing.
I think the dragons here definitely helps, but I totally agree with that. That Disarm isn't the greatest game ever made. But the presence of dragons is making it a little bit easier to deal with.
There's something to be said for gateway games where people know what the basic mechanics are already. Because I used to play a lot of rummy with my dad, and that was a real way for us to connect. We used to play a lot of Rummy 500 we had, which is where you play multiple ones and you can pick up the whole draw pile. So it's a longer, more complicated variant. But we used to play that for quite a long time, actually. And so that's a real way to connect. So I think that if I was buying a game for my dad, then one that was based on rummy would have a real draw. So it's more about the people rather than the actual, mechanics.
On the other hand, sometimes it's like, well, if it's too close to rummy, why not just play rummy? Because why not, show a completely different experience? Yeah. Timmy's got a wee highlight, which with car parts coming in, and that sounds awesome. And if you need to get around in Nova Scotia in your car, in your automobile, then enjoy your newfangled, brand spanking new bit of your car. Who doesn't like hand management and set collection, says Alex. So, yes, for those who don't know what rummy is a game played with a traditional deck of cards with, hearts, spades, diamonds, and clubs, and then you're picking up things, and traditionally, each turn you pick up a card and then you put down a card. You can either pick up a random card or you can pick up the one from the top of the deck. Sometimes you can do whichever you want. Sometimes you need to put down everything at one go. And the way you can lay down things is every card needs to be either part of a set, which is things that are the same number but different suits, or it can be part of a run, which is the same suit and adjacent numbers. And once in some versions of rummy, which is the simplest, you wait until everything in your hands can be put into different sets, and then you win, and that's it. In other versions of the game, there's an element of timing, which is the versions that we play, where you can put things down onto the table. Once you've come down, you can start adding things to other people's sets, and you can pick up from sets and put down on sets. And so there's a little bit of a puzzle each turn of, okay, if I take that jack away from there and that king away from there, because there's 4 jacks here and 4 kings here, so they're still free, so it's still a valid set because you need to have 3 to make it a valid set, then I can add my queen of the same suit and I can get rid of that 1 card. So there is a little bit of a puzzle element, but I think that once it feels like the ceiling for skill is quite low. That's, yeah.
Yeah, it's a game to pass the time, so I'd class it in that category of games where you're going on a walk with friends, you've come to a pub, they've got a deck of cards, ooh, let's play some rummy, rather than anything where you actively go out and seek to play it.
So, are there any other recent highlights other than Dragon's Wild for you, Dina?
My kid got a bicycle yesterday as a late birthday present. So that's huge, in our house. We actually got to take the bike to kindergarten today, which the whole run usually takes us about like half an hour to an hour. And today it was like 20 minutes faster than so.
Ooh, so only 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's big for us.
Oh, bicycles are just brilliant. I mean,
yeah,
see the world at a faster rate. True story, while I was here, I was thinking, oh, could I get this old bicycle fixed up? And then I was in the bike shop. Well, I wasn't in it. I was outside it, looking at the poster on the outside, and they said, we will open at such and such a date. Our workshop is currently full, but on this date, we will open at 9 a.m. We will take the first 25 bicycles only. And so... yeah, everyone.
So you have to queue.
I guess so, but also it might be that those first 25, it might take them a day to get in. I don't know, but it seems like I'm not gonna. Personally, other than playing Grummy, which despite my disinclination for the game, it is lovely to spend time with the family. The other thing that I enjoyed was having a making dinner date with one of my parents. So we made choresh game. Choresh game means literally, choresh is kind of a word that means stew or curry. Game is things that are cut up finely. So you've got onions that you cut up really finely and then you fry them for about 20-30 minutes, literally. And then once you've got them, you put them into a plate. You've got the meats, you kind of fry the meats, and then you add in the mixed spices, the turmeric, the concentrated tomato, a wee bit of water, bring the onions back in, and the split lentils. It's all about the split lentils. And so it's a very tomato flavored sauce. It's like literally maybe 125 grams of concentrated tomato puree, like half a tube. And so you've got all of this going on, and it's normally served with rice and rice cooked. If you've got a rice cooker, you can do tahdig, which is the best way to cook potatoes, in my opinion, which is a complicated way. But basically, you've got the potatoes on the bottom, so they're frying on one side. The other side, you've got the taste of the rice that comes in. So it's not like a scalable thing. You can't cook more and more tahdig. For every bit of rice that you can cook, you can only have one layer of tahdig, if that makes sense. But you've got the soft side, you've got the crispy side, and it's really good. Anyway,
sounds really nice.
We sat that down, and it turns out well. Oh, also there's dried limes in it, and so
I like dried limes. I like dried limes a lot. Yeah, we cook a lot of lentils in this house. So my other half is vegetarian. So while I'm not vegetarian, I probably eat meat once a fortnight, maybe. Possibly even less than that. So we eat quite a lot of lentils. He's very keen on dal. We have lots of different types of dal.
Nice.
Dals are delicious, though. So yeah, I would do that too. My kid is not really keen on dal itself, but he will eat just feed him tomatoes and carrots, and he's super happy.
Carrots are a good thing for for kids. Mine both like raw carrots cut into little pennies, little circles. They will just eat bowls full of those. So long may it last.
Fingers crossed.
If someone's never had lentils, what would you say to them?
Lentils are good. I'd say that a fairly easy way for a Western palate to get into lentils is to think about some of the sort of stewy green lentil kind of stew things that are quite popular in. France do a lot of green lentil stews with sausages on top, and those are really good. I think that's.
Or alternatively, if
Yeah.
you're making a soup, or even if you are ever cooking a soup for yourself, just throw in some lentils. And are
Anything
easy.
tomato based, yeah. Like if you're serving pasta, even adding just some lentils into that is.
Yeah, you need to cook them for a good while, like kind of simmering them for half an hour, or even. Well, this dish is very long, so I think 7, 5. So it simmered for basically 2 hours. But yeah, there's a lot. You don't with lentils. If you boil it for half an hour, then it works, or you can simmer it for quite a while. And I'm not familiar with donair, though. Are you familiar with this?
No, but I'm sure it's nice. Most things I like.
I will have a wee look at that, but whilst we're looking at that, Alex says Alex had a playtest of a roll and write last night on Mark Peebles' stream. Some really thought-provoking feedback, and Alex is now thinking of which bits to salvage from the game. That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's always a good stage, isn't it? When you're like, oh, I need to take some bits out. Which bits do I need to take? Which bits do I need to keep?
Oh, so apparently Donair is a chain of restaurants established in Nova Scotia. There you go. The brand has a cult-like following, says Wikipedia.
It's apparently, mostly popular in East Coast Canada.
Where Timmy is from, of course.
Yeah. And it started out gaining popularity in the 70s, is what I'm getting here.
So, if we want to talk more about food, that is up to the people, but here's where we leave it up to you. It's time for the questionably quick questions. The first thing I always ask is, what time is it? Where are you? Here it is 10:17 a.m. I am in the UK. I am more specifically in Glasgow. Jess.
Ditto. It's also 10:17, but I am in Reading, which is just to the west of London. So I'm about 6 hours on a train south of you.
And I am in South Finland, in Hämeenlinna. It's 12:18 p.m. I had to check. Yeah, so I'm 2 hours into the future, and I think it takes about like half a day to travel here. Like you go to the airport, take an airport to somewhere, and so it takes approximately half a day.
And so anyone who wants to chuck in some questionably quick questions, you have about a minute to do so. So, Alex, you sometimes say you weren't aware and you make all these excuses. Well, you know. And Yoda is in... Is this... I assume this isn't her actual address.
You've just posted it online.
No, what does 8:15 what does 8:15 refer to? I know Lelystad is the city, Flevoland is the district, the Netherlands is the country, Europe is the continent, Earth is the planet. But solar system, that's not the name of the solar system. But yeah, we're in the Milky Way, and it is 11:18 a.m. UK time. But 8:15 Kempenaar, I hope that's not your street address.
We'll have to blank that bit out from the YouTube.
Yeah.
We'll we'll all go and look at your address on Google Street View. This is the thing, you can do that with Google Street View. You can literally go and look at anything. It's a bit
odd.
And
did you hear this?
Food again.
Timmy, it says that Donair is based on doner, but it's beef instead of lamb. Yeah, I mean, like, for me, okay, let me ask that question. So let me ask you, what is doner to you? Because to me, doner, it could be lamb doner, it could be chicken doner. What about you, Jess? Let's go around.
It's a drunken night out, you know. It's not about the meat. It's about the, you know, the location and the sauces. I'm not sure. I mean, I know that you can have, you know, doner kebabs, which are not from a dodgy kebab shop on the corner. But, you know, but when I think about it, I think of, you know, student days. So I'm not sure whether it's beef or lamb. I'm just sure that it comes with big green pickles and lots of sauce. That's what it means to me, anyway.
What does it mean to you, Dina?
It's a type of food I've never had because the association Jess is having with drunken nights out is just not really appealing to me as a type of food, and it just always seems so messy. So to me, it's like, yeah, sticky and fatty food. That's what I'm thinking. So I've actually never had one. And I'm vegetarian, so leaning vegan. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
See, I
anything
haven't
that
had
comes
one
with
for
it.
about, you know, I haven't had one for about 15 years. So.
Okay, so we've got a question from Alex, which is, if you had control of a public plinth that you could showcase anything of your choice for a year, what would you put on there? Oh, this is a good question. So can we change them? I think that I would try and have maybe, I don't know, this would be, am I open to corruption? Am I able to take some bids? Because I would be tempted to do that. I mean, it's not, I mean, how many people are going to come and check out this public plinth? I mean, how much am I able to communicate to the people? Because one angle of it is what I want to tell people about. Do I want to tell them about a public figure? Do I want to tell them about something that's been achieved, like some message? Maybe each day there's like a different message or a different inscription each day. That might be quite nice. Or do I want to just sell it to the highest bidder?
I think I'd quite like to. So I think I'd quite like to have some diagrams, maybe changing diagrams, you know, like those pie charts of things that people are very mistaken about. And I'm thinking specifically public finances and government finances. So I know a while back there was a pie chart which was printed on some T-shirts. I don't know originally where it came from. It might have been a UK think tank like the New Economics Foundation or something like that, which was about where welfare pay, you know, what welfare is actually spent on, with the biggest amount being pensions, you know, and people don't think about it being pensions, you know, so it was challenging public perceptions and saying, actually, you know, people think such and such, this is what the real statistics are. So I think perhaps if there were several of those, and it could be changed, you know, perhaps once every month to, you know, this is what public money is actually spent on in this field, or this is what public money is actually spent on in this field. You know, I think that would be really interesting. There you go. That's my showcase for a year.
That seems like a, yeah, kind of giving extra visibility and transparency.
Yeah, exactly.
You could call it So You Think You Know.
How about you, Dina?
I think maybe I would see if I could get one of those original light bulbs from Tesla to showcase it, to saying that any great idea can be given away for free.
That could be good. Yeah.
Okay, like this is definitely something with a, yeah, it feels like there's a lot of responsibility
Right?
with what you present to the world on this public plinth. I mean, I'm not ready for all this responsibility. Maybe I just sell it to the highest bidder. I'm going to be honest. I am so tempted to do that.
Well, it
Well,
depends what they
it does
pay for
say,
it.
yeah, and it does say that you have control of it. So maybe you could chuck someone out and have like 1 month each.
Mm.
You could run a competition. You could, you'd have 12 winners.
Yeah.
Could be that it's
like a lot
an
of
extra
management.
prize for the LDEC competition. Like if you're the top designer, then you get to have a statue of you on this plinth. Although I'm not, although presumably I still have to pay the money for making the statue or whatever. So maybe it's just like, okay, because it says you control it, you can showcase. So maybe it's not like you can commission whatever you want and you have access to an infinite budget. You can't like just make any. What?
I don't know. I think if you went and asked online, then people would be willing to pay you to go on it. Probably.
So you could run like a patronage.
Yeah.
GoFundMe.
So we've got Timmy giving us a wee bit of info about this. So doner is a beef doner inside a wrap with a sweet sauce made out of condensed milk and vinegar in a pita with tomato and onion. That sounds it sounds like a good quality doner, basically.
Yeah.
And Timmy's all about the moon mist ice cream, more Nova Scotia stuff. And Alex suggests going back to the plinth, maybe a Klein bottle, but I thought that Klein bottles couldn't exist in three-dimensional space. I thought it was a four-dimensional concept. Maybe I'm mixing it up.
I mean, you've got a year, so there's time in there as well. Who knows?
But let's move on to the brilliant thing. Brilliant thing. What's a little thing which is brilliant? Brilliant thing. Sorry, wrong banner. Brilliant thing. There we go. Brilliant thing. So I thought that we might want to talk about press releases. I mean, why are press releases worth doing? Why are press releases brilliant?
Well, they can be good. I think they're a useful way of telling people what you're doing. I know that, I mean, certainly when I used to work in political campaigning, then it was really useful to have, a set of documents where people were like, oh, what is it that you're saying? We're like, right, we have a quote here, and here is the quote, here is the document, it's downloadable, it's just nicely contained. So I suppose it's something where the expectations are fairly simply set out. They know what they're wanting, you know what they want. It's like, right, here it is, it's in one document, here you go.
And it comes back to this lovely thing that you keep saying, and I keep reminding myself of the notion of clarity being of the utmost importance. And then, if you've got a working relationship, it's clear, then fair, and then kind, which is something you've said in the past.
That is something I have said on multiple occasions. Yeah, that whenever you're doing anything, then you might want to be really kind and helpful and everything, but actually being clear is much more important. Being clear and then being fair and then being nice, being kind.
And it kind of comes into your marketing as well, I guess, that you've got to have some clarity. And so that means that with the press release, assuming it's well written, then you're giving the clarity of focus. This is what the story is. This is what I'm telling you about. And it's a way to communicate with lots of people. Dina, why do you think press releases are a brilliant thing?
I think it gives a really good outline for expectations coming up.
So again, that clarity, that shall we talk about what a press release even is? And maybe I'll have a stab at vaguely what I understand, and then Jess can add on bits, and then Dina, you can tell us where we went wrong. So, as I understand it, a press release is basically something that you've written up that you're sending to multiple people that gives them the information to write a story about something of note that you or your company is doing? Jess.
Yeah, I think that's fairly accurate. So my colleague Mill recently did the first draft of a really great press release for us, which was exactly that. It was, this is what we're doing, this is why it's important, this is how, this is what we're going to be doing in the future. And certainly, from my previous work, which is political campaigning, then the most important thing has always been, what's your take on this action? Because it's not so much something that's being sold, but it's a point of view you want to get across. So I think press releases can differ quite a lot between industries, which has been my struggle, because because although I've done a fair amount of sort of media work for political campaigns, then it's not been for a product before. So I'm finding myself kind of in that weird position where I think I know what I'm doing, but then I go, oh no, hang on, actually I don't. It's a whole new industry.
So, Dina, how would you define press releases if we're trying to work out what exactly they are?
Okay, so for me, I see press releases as a document where you're describing what, who, when, and where in order to direct people to what is going to happen. And you're just basically giving them all the information that would be required in order to choose whether or not they are agreeing with you or wanting to join along, depending on what type of press release it is.
That's a really good, clear way of doing this. See, here I am waffling, and Dina's like, no, it's just what, where, who, which is great, because, because the thing is that because I'm not an expert, then I sort of jump in and go, oh, hang on, we want to tell this and this and this. So I spend ages trying to rearrange things into what I think is, possibly the right way round. But it can be difficult because I'm not necessarily the audience, so I'm doing it for a press audience who are going to be looking for different things than I'm personally looking for.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely...
And obviously, yeah. That's correct.
So a press release, is that something that you're always going to be sending to many different media people as a blank carbon copy to everyone?
I prefer to have like the press release, and then I do an email where the document is attached to, that has like a more personal approach to like, this is why I'm sending it to you, where I also link back to like, I actually know who I'm talking to. So like, oh, I really liked your take on this particular topic. And I talk more about like why I liked it and the reasoning for me sending what I am sending them. And asking maybe if there's a possibilities for collaboration further, and leaving it very open to them in terms of like, so there's very different types of responding. So the call to action is pretty clear, and then it leaves it up to them like how they're wanting to perceive like what they're doing with the document, but also that I'm telling them that I want the feedback so that we may, do more things.
Yeah, that seems really clear, actually. So it's it's one thing which potentially everybody could access. I mean, certainly I know that for some types of organizations and some industries, then you'd upload them all to your website. So anybody who wanted could come along and say, oh yes, that was the press release from whenever. Though I don't know if that's common in this industry, because we're selling a product rather than quoting on a thing which has happened.
Jess, could you talk through how you wrote the press release, and let's use a case study, and let's chat about what you did and how you did it with who?
Yeah.
And
so I'm using this all in a plural person, because the person who physically did the most work on this, the actual press release, she can't be here today, but her name is Mill. And Mill is the person who actually, she has more of an idea about these sorts of press releases, because as I say, I've come from a different sector. So we have a game coming out, we're planning to go to Kickstarter in July. The game is called Library Labyrinth, and we thought, okay, let's put out a press release. We timed the press release for the beginning of March because the game features 100 women role models. There are a few non-binary characters in there as well, but they are mainly women. So we thought, right, let's time it for International Women's Day, which is the 8th of March. And so the press release was basically saying, we're working on this project. We think it's a great project. Here are some reasons we think it's cool. This is going to be a dungeon crawler type game, which has 100 book characters who come out of the books to help you in your dungeon crawler. The game is called Library Labyrinth. You're in a library. You've got horrors that are come out of the books. You've got to get past all these horrors, and to help you ask these famous role models to come out. So you've got Ada Lovelace coming out, to help you get past some lasers, and you might ask, for Joan of Arc to come and help you defeat a basilisk, that sort of thing. Loads of different characters. So we thought, right, let's, how do we tell people about this? So as I said, my background is from the campaigning sector. My colleague Mill comes from a theatre background. She's been a producer for various theatre productions. She's done a lot of fringe shows and, really interesting things within the arts environment. So her experience was much more relevant to this, where it's a creative project, rather than something where you're saying, I like this piece of legislation, or I don't like this piece of legislation, which is more where I'm coming from. So we talked about what we actually wanted to say in the press release, which was, there's this project, we're doing it, we think it's cool. We talked about some of the hooks we thought that people, the reasons that people would think it was cool as well, saying, oh, there's 100 role models here. Some of them are historical, some of them are literary characters, so, you might need different skills to get past some of these, these literary horrors. So there's Cerberus, for example, the three-headed dog, who guards the underworld. So, you have to get past Cerberus. So one of the ways you can get past Cerberus would be to have the skill of storytelling, because, Cerberus needs to be put to sleep, and music or storytelling, can put Cerberus to sleep. That's the idea. So then you might want a literary character like Jo March from Little Women, who has the storytelling skill. So it was trying to explain all that. So as you can tell, I am waffling on, and I've said loads of words, and it's how do you condense that down into a press release, something which gets that information to people who want to talk about things. So particularly if you've got, when you've got magazines or blogs or even content creators who are doing more of a roundup type podcast rather than a let's look specifically at this game type podcast, then they're going to be wanting some kind of content. They're going to be wanting things to talk about or write about, or just to put in the the section which is hey, there's upcoming news. They're going to want to share stuff. So it's how do we make what we're doing, which we think is great, how do we explain the attractiveness? So as I said, we looked for a date hook as well, which was the 8th of March. We sent out the press release just before the 8th of March to say, hey, this is something, you might all be thinking about International Women's Day. This is something which is a feminist dungeon crawler set in a library. Isn't this cool? And we had a little bit more information about it. We had a quote from Mill saying, what she thought about it, a quote from me. The team is bigger than just me and Mill. So we've got an artist working on it. We've got an art director. We've also been talking to other organisations. We've got a partnership now with the Mary Seacole Trust, which is a charity here in the UK, where we're talking to their youth council, which is fantastic. So I think at some point we'll put out a press release saying, you know, hey, we've been talking to these teenagers and they've been telling us how to make our game better. You know, this is a great thing to do. But it's, you know, so that's what we did. You know, we put out a press release.
So
And,
when you say you put out a press release, what exactly does that entail? Does that entail writing a thing and then sending it as one email to lots of people? Does it entail tailoring it to the individual? How much tailoring did you do?
So what we did first was we talked about the things we wanted to go in it. We then wrote down what some of this would be, and it ended up as a document which is basically a side of, so one side of paper. So I was going to say a side of A4, but that makes less sense to people in America. A side of paper, whether it's letter or A4 or whatever. And it was probably a little bit long, actually. I think we had it filling most of the side, so it was a physical document. We had a Google Doc, where we could send the link over, and I think we probably PDF'd it as well. But we said this is the press release, and it had the title and the contact details and things so people knew how to get in touch with us. We then separately had done a list of the organizations, the press organizations we thought might be interested, and some of them were within the tabletop gaming community, but actually a lot of them were local newspapers and contacts that Mill had from her theatre background, because we thought actually there could be some crossover, and some of these some of the local newspapers might be really interested to say, oh, okay, yes, someone local who's done a lot of theatre work has been doing this, and that could be something interesting that they could talk about. So I think we'll probably concentrate on those again in the future. We just had a whole load of email addresses and sent out so we curated them. We looked through them and worked out which ones we wanted and which fitted in which categories, and then sent out the one document. And I think we sent it mainly to one list, blind carbon copied, of course. And then, I think there were a few others where we said, oh, yes, we specifically want to reach out to that person, or they're a little bit different. But we got loads of really good responses back. Some people were saying, oh, that's interesting. There were people who, were saying, oh, yes, I'm not going to include that in my blog, but let me know when you're further along. So it acted a bit like a sort of, not quite a save the date, but like a, kind of like a save the date almost, without a proper date.
Some awareness, and he might be talking about it down the line for sure.
Exactly.
Did you find a big difference between the people that you did a blind carbon copy to versus the ones that you wrote in a little bit more about, okay, this is specifically why it's relevant to you, not just this is why it's relevant to gamers, or this is why it, because for sure when it's the theatre company, it feels like, okay, that's almost a local interest. Okay, one of the people who's a theatre producer, someone from our community has now ventured off into this other world and made a board game. That's a completely different story to anyone who's in the board game industry, which might be, I guess there might be, oh, someone from theatre has come to make this, but the more interesting thing for them is going to be, okay, what does this game do differently? Whereas the theatre producers, it might be just, okay, there's a game at all that comes from our community. That's enough of a story.
Yeah. That is a really good point, and I don't know the answer, but it's a really good thing to think about, to say, okay, how are we pitching this differently at different people? Because they'll have different spaces in their content to fill, essentially. the key thing I found, because I was, I'm a little bit nervous about this. The key thing I found, and this speaks to me, is to just go for it and do it. Because when Mill and I were talking about it, and I was saying, "Oh, do we need to get this bit perfect or that bit perfect?" She was saying, "Just do it. Just, we just need to send it out. The timing is important, and So I think it can be really difficult for some people when you want to be perfectionist about it, and actually just sending it out, having it act like a first conversation rather than making sure it's perfect. I think that's actually a really good lesson I'd pass on to somebody else. It was definitely good.
I do want to definitely say hello to Rob and thank you for joining us. And yeah, we just to catch anyone up, we are chatting about this successful press release. But talking about making it specific to people, but also just getting it done. I think that's the two balancing acts, because in theory, you could, on one end of the scale, listen to every podcast that someone's produced and spend however many hundreds of hours that might be, and then try and really ponder, okay, what haven't they covered? What is unique to them? And what unique angle am I going to bring? And sometimes I'm at risk of going too far along that side. The other angle is to just I've had this happen where someone included me on a list of about 169 media folk, and then it wasn't a blind carbon copy, it was actually a carbon copy. So then I was actually amazed how short it lasted, but it maybe shows how sensible board gamers are, that we had maybe 4 people replying to the entire chain. And were you part of this, Dina?
I was not a part of the chain, no, but I did get to see it.
Okay. It sounds like it could have been a bit of a nightmare, but luckily only a few people replied all. Is that what you're saying, Ben?
Yes, exactly. That there were maybe 4 people who replied all, and I can't even remember the company, but so it's like, okay, I'm not even going to bother replying to this. I can't be bothered. It's like, to me, that's no different than putting it up as a Facebook post that's, hey, it's an open invite, that's what they're saying. And that's obviously... And then it made me think of UK Games Expo. I can't remember when it was that I met one of the people from Geek Dad. I think it might have been 2018, maybe 2017. It was probably 2018. I can't remember anyway. The point is that when you go to a convention, sometimes you have this list of, hey, here are the press people who are attending. Because from the press people's point of view, of course, they want to have stories from the people who are at the convention. From the stall owner's point of view, of course, I want to get that story into the hands of people for whom it might be interesting. And then, I spent maybe a month thinking, okay, I'm going to go through all these people and really... But then it came to like maybe the week beforehand, I was, okay, I'm going to just... If it's fewer than 5 days before the actual show, that's just too late. So I'm going to just go through as many as I can. And I spent maybe half an hour maximum on each person. But, even that amount that I spent, someone was like, oh, lots of people emailed me, but you're the one who actually, I felt, knew who I was. And the fact that they said, oh, yeah, I see that you've reviewed children's books and but here's a word game, and maybe it fits in with your daughter, because I found somewhere that they've got a daughter. It wasn't like, trudging through lots of information. They might have alluded to it in one of the reviews. And saying something like that can definitely build a connection. But then if you've already got a connection with a person, then you get that person on your mailing list. Like, let's say I sent out an email to... I'm trying to think, like Kelly Lee and Ben, because I'm always on their Twitch and are sometimes here, and there's this assumption that, okay, I know what you're about. We've already interacted. I don't need to say this is the reason for this. But then maybe, sometimes it is just, this is the way I do it. And I sent Dina a blank carbon copy email like not too long ago, which was like for 3 people. And it was like, do I actually spend the time to just say, this is why it's relevant to you? And sometimes people understand that people can't do that for everyone else. And I don't know if it seemed too impersonal that I did that to you, Dina. But I just think that there's definitely utility in just using the BCC. But yeah. And just talking, Alex says, I love a good chain email, reminds me of the good old days. We had that at work a couple of years ago. Someone wanted to contact their department about their cake club, but accidentally mailed 1,500 or more people. Then people started hitting reply all, and the email server crashed soon afterwards. And yeah, Alex has heard of that maybe, but with the NHS and Cake Club talks about email screw-ups. Oh, it was only 840,000 people. I mean, yeah, the more people, that's like, if you've got 5 people, if you've got like 0.1% of people, like 1 in 1,000, that's still going to be 840 people hitting reply all. If I get 840 emails, that's a lot. Yeah. But at least, if you've got some client that does some sensible chaining like Gmail, it's not too bad. But then if you've got something that actually shows them all in your inbox as separate emails, that's, yeah, anyway.
I think if you're outlining why, as in why the people are in the email, like when you were sending to me, Beth, I think you were really good at explaining why we were all getting the email. So it seemed like it was a natural way of opening the email. So therefore it didn't really seem detached, and you wouldn't have to, specify why each and every one of us was on the list, because it became pretty clear in the intro. And obviously, if you do it like that, that can obviously be done. But when you are emailing it to like 50 plus people, then it might need a different type of intro versus you're just emailing a document and having a set intro for all of them. Some of those people might.
All the people you're emailing, let's say you're emailing 200 board game reviewers. And so that they're interested in board games, they're interested in family weight games. This is what you're making, and maybe they want to, maybe they want to review a game about libraries and have some sort of library labyrinth. I don't know. That might be something that they might be interested. Or maybe they're interested in a cooperative word games. It doesn't mean that those people have specifically reviewed cooperative games in the past, but it's like whether you're interested, unless someone's been very vocal about saying, I hate cooperative games, I'm not going to play cooperative games. Or if someone's like, hey, I only review miniature games, doesn't it feel like the way that I would approach someone who loves, the way that I would approach 100 different reviewers might be incredibly similar. So maybe, is it appropriate to do a BCC for that?
Yeah, what people are just like casually interested, definitely I think that 100 list can have one intro. But when in some of the cases, at least when I'm working with my clients, is that we are also targeting people who we think would be particularly interested in it. And then for those, we will include like a particular, like a special intro. It's like, I saw you do this, therefore I think this might be a good fit for you. Because that would be a fit for that. And we always make sure that we're following them on social media. We interact with them as well, so that they're familiar with where the name comes from, in order to increase the opening rates as well, and lowering the threshold for them to reach out and actually share the press release or create content around it.
Dina, can I ask about, so with ours, I think it was mainly that we did it and we got lucky. There's an element of that. We didn't faff around as much as we certainly didn't faff around in the way that I was worried we were going to, or the way I wanted to, really. Mill was very clear, look, we've just got to do this, and we did it. But I think we did a fair amount, we did some following up later, where we sent, the one email, which was, BCC'd, and then for some people we sort of did some following up and said, did you get this? What about this? We sent that to you specifically. So I wonder whether that, those kind of, that following up with another email, whether that is not as good as making sure the first email is better, or whether there's any benefit to that, or whether it looked like we were being a bit careless, which we were. Well, I was anyway. Mill knows what she's doing. I'm a bit like, I'll just do it.
I think it's better to have a good first email in order to, good at first impressions and all that, provide all social links in order for those who are just curious and wants to check it out. Then following up with another email when it has been left unanswered for a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
Though obviously you can do that, and in some cases it is a good thing to do, because obviously things happen, and with you having a very time sensitive in terms of Women's Day, in those cases I would make sure that I'm at least quite early when it comes to the content that I'm providing them. So at the latest 7 days prior to a big event, I would preferably start 20 days prior, so that people have time to prepare the content, because obviously they're going to write something around it, and content creation isn't something you just email, I can throw that out later today. That's probably never going to happen. So I'd rather focus on being in at particularly good time when it is a time sensitive, and also in the cases where you think you might wanting to follow up, have a better email at first.
That's really good advice. Thank you.
And a quick hello to Jeroen, who just popped up. I think that's your name. Do tell me if I'm misremembering or mispronouncing it. But yeah, that key takeaway is if you don't have the time to do that work ahead of time, then you can send out that BCC, you can chase up people, and that seems like a reasonable way to do it. Especially if it's like, hey, this Kickstarter is going to launch at the end of the year, and this is a general awareness, because it strikes me that you can give press releases when you know the exact date, but you can also, or indeed, I know that Inside the Box sent off, I don't know exactly how they handled the press release for Seize the Power, but then it was on that Shut Up and Sit Down, which was really fun to see. And then one of the writers seemed really excited by the idea, although there's a couple of wrong inferrals, if you know what I mean. Like, obviously they didn't have the entire story of how the game plays, but a couple of assumptions that they might have made might have been slightly wrong. So I hope that people aren't reading that and assuming that everything there is correct and then being disappointed when the actual game is revealed. But in any case, this is just a, hey, we've signed this game, or hey, we've got this date, we've got this. And with companies that are focusing on game after game after game, this seems like a really good job of just saying, this is the date, this is when we're going to, but having that other sort of vague press release, as you called it, Dina, vague interest or casual interest, I think were your exact words, then you can send it out to people to say, hey, this game is estimated Kickstarter for the end of the year. This is going to be like this, and this is what we've done so far. And we will be sending out, and maybe outline your plans, whether that involves we will have this many review copies, or whether what the game entails. And it's just a vague notion. And even if they don't necessarily follow it up, then at least it's on the radar. And then you can use those people and see, okay, firstly, does anyone reply? In which case you've entered a conversation, and make sure that you do have that back and forth. Or for those who don't reply, if you do take the time to then have a proper listen to a few more of their episodes and get a bit more in depth and have a proper understanding, then you can not chase them up, that's the wrong word, but follow up and say, hey, just to say, these are the reasons why I think it would be of interest to you, and if you have any questions, please do let me know. I don't know. Yeah, let me know if I see the nodding, so I'm assuming that I'm on the right track.
That being on the radar, I think, is really important, because it's not just on the radar for press releases, but it's being on Twitter and being on Facebook and, having talked about it. So this is the thing which I find really tricky, because I've come from a background where, the raising awareness I'm quite good at. So I'm quite used to the sort of being there and keeping on saying, yeah, this is an idea which is great, or this is whatever. But then for me, I think the difficulty is, how do you change that being on the radar from something which is just raising awareness of something to an idea, to a much firmer idea, to something where people are actually going to take an action on it. They're actually going to say, oh yes, I'm going to write about this, or oh yes, I'm going to, because when somebody's writing about it in their blog, or they're including it in their news roundup, or they're putting it in their magazine, then they're essentially, they're, well, I mean, not completely, but they're semi-endorsing it. They're saying, oh, I think this is a good idea. They might not have actually seen the game, because it might be a project in the future, but they're still saying, yeah, this sounds like a good thing to me. So it's that step for me, because I'm quite used to the raising awareness, but how do you get from that to actually persuading people it's a good idea? That's still a bit of a mystery, and I think it probably comes down a bit to audience, because I haven't really got the experience of putting myself in other people's shoes, yet. I'm learning, but I haven't got that experience of saying, okay, well, our core audience wants this or that or whatever. So it's a really, there are so many different parts to it, aren't there?
I mean, and obviously, I've kind of dabbled in a lot of things in the board game world. I've reviewed games. I've done a lot of media. Now this is 344. That's more episodes than there are of most things, frankly. But even though some of them have been very loosely board game related, in the fourth season has been a bit delved into video games quite a lot. I'm not going to lie. And there's probably going to be a bit more of that when I go into... But we've also had almost double feature episodes where I spend 2 hours talking to someone, and then just because I'm so starved of attention, or I spend another hour or 2 hours afterwards playing video games and having people comment on it. But yes, if I'm playing a game on my own, let's say when I played Friday, what does that mean? I was quite upfront with, this is a game, it's the first time I've played it. I'm not saying that that's a good game. I mean, as it happens, it felt like a reasonable game. I talked about it along the way, and people who've watched these kinds of things will know, when I was talking about Warlock of Firetop Mountain, I can't help myself but have a wee natter about how problematic some of the bits of text were. But if you are being paid to do something, then that's obviously different. Or if you've got size bits, when we get into the notion of doing paid previews, and that sense is almost abhorrent to me. I know I'm going off on a wee bit of a tangent, but to me, previews are basically talking about a game that isn't there. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily paid. It doesn't mean that if I do a paid how to play, yeah, I could understand that. That's not me giving my opinion. If I do a paid song about a game, well, I'm trying to make a song. That doesn't mean that the game has to be good for me to write a song about it. And so I don't see that as a problem. If I say, okay, I'm at a point where I would call it a preview or a review, if there's any opinion there at all, you have to. But even there, it's why did you put this thing? And for sure on YouTube, which is interesting because Tom Scott's got the whole bit how YouTube has more stringent rules than most of broadcasting television. Playthrough, that's an interesting one. Alex asks my opinion, and that'd be I think that if someone were to pay me to do a playthrough, it would be such a departure from my normal style of playthrough where I play and then I can't help but give opinions. And I guess I would be okay with that. I don't think I'd have an ethical issue with that. And I can definitely, with people who do playthroughs and they don't give opinions, then I can totally see that's totally fair. But, and just, it's, why is this thing here? Like, if you send a thing to Rado, like Richard Ham, Rado will not just accept any game, even if you pay them. You know, Rado, if you say, hey, I've got a game, would you like to look at it? They'll say, okay, can you please send me the instructions? And then you'll have the instructions and they'll say, yeah, that seems good. Or no, that seems like something that I'm not interested in. Maybe it doesn't play well at 2 players in there. Because if you've got enough experience with games, you can probably have a good sense of a game. Frankly, I read the instructions for a game and then I said, by the way, if you want to review it, I will, but here's some big problems that I see. And then the person said, oh yeah, actually those are problems well spotted. And part of that is because in terms of how many games I've actually play tested, like that have made, I don't know if it's definitely 100, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's 100. And like sorry, this is getting into Bez Big Sir.
That's
someone
fine.
else. Like, but you know, I do think that there is definitely a sense that people, when they're watching something, if I say clearly, this is something that's been paid to do, then you have that understanding, this is because I've been paid to do it. If I'm having Dina on, if I'm having Jess on, then there's that implicit sense that it's because I think that these 2 people are people worth listening to, that I believe that these 2 people are people worth talking to. And if I have a game that I'm playing for the first time, which I'm picking up Friday because it was just over here, then I'm kind of saying this is a game that has enough going on. Having read the instructions, I think it's not going to be a total waste of time. And it's something that I think is worth my time. I'm not being paid by this. This is something that is worth my time, and maybe it will be entertaining to people watching. Conversely, if I say, yeah, you know what, I'm just trying all the Steam games that I managed to get with the Humble Bundle, and that is the reason, well, at least I've presented it. That is the way I've presented it. And I will probably do that at some point. I'll say, yeah, I'm playing for all the games that I've got with my Humble Bundle, and I'll play them for like 2 hours each, and then I'll decide whether it's a good game or not. But maybe people will be entertained by me giving random opinions or making noise. I don't, like, why do people even want to play? It's...
There are multiple things going on here. So, Bez, that's actually really interesting. So I personally find this kind of digging down into the roots of things really fascinating. Some people are like, oh no, let's not, let's just talk about it, let's have an opinion and talk about it. But I really like this kind of, philosophical unpicking of it, because you're right that it's about transparency. I completely agree. It's about being really clear. But the other thing I think about, which is not to go against you, but to say something which is a factor in here, is that supposing that nobody paid anybody else, you'd kind of have a situation where you wouldn't have advertising for things. So I think about it like this. Supposing that people didn't advertise stuff, then all you've got going on is...
When you say didn't advertise, you mean paid advertisements?
Paid advertisements. Yeah, paid advertisements, I think. I mean, let's not think of it as being about board games at all. Let's just think about stuff. You have a thing which you want to advertise. You've come up with a great idea, you have a new thing, you want to advertise it. Supposing that there wasn't any paid advertisement available, then you are relying on word of mouth. So you've basically got back to your product being successful based on who you know. And that doesn't feel right. That kind of feels a bit like nepotism, because it's not true, or at least, so I'm pretty sure it's not true that a good idea will just find its way out there, because somebody who invents a good idea and they're living up in, they're living up in the Highlands of Scotland, and they've got terrible internet and they don't have any friends, but they might have a really, really good idea. There's no way that good idea could get to other people. They need a channel to explain what it is. And and not to draw it away from board games, but I work a lot with...
No, 100%.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. And, Dina and I were talking about things this morning and how, frankly, it's going to be the relationships with distributors. And it's all about that relationship building that is going to take things to the next order of magnitude. And, I keep illustrating, in a bind yogi, yes, one is nicer packaging, but I don't think that's the entire story of why that one has sold 2 orders of magnitude more than the other. I think it's basically because of the international partners, because of the fact that Gigamic is going to all these shows in France and really sharing it with all these people. And I mean, the fact that they got a Dice Tower review, and the Dice Tower review isn't even like a blip compared to the review that they had with this Korean person who has this child that's kind of doing this weird dance at the end. And that has like something like 500,000 views on it. And it's just... And honestly, they're watching because of the kids. They're not watching... Like, this is just a super popular channel with like obscene numbers. And like, this is the kind of channel where it's more than board games, because board games channels, let's be honest, it's a tiny, tiny blip. If you manage to get yourself into the mainstream where like little kid dances and Korean, and like, it seems like most of the Korean population is watching this. It's just, I had to Google Translate all the text for the video, because of course I'm curious, but then actually what's being said, but it is all about who 100% agreed, and who do you send your thing to, and building up those relationships. And I did lots of work in that before launching my first game. Like, I'm a very social person, going out to UK Games Expo since 2011 and showing my game to other people like Andy Hopwood, and there's all sorts of people who play tested it, and telling people about it and trying to spread the word, and knowing that I have to spread the word, and telling everyone in London on board about it. Some of those people backed it, and then at the time I had almost 1,000 Facebook friends, and now I've kind of stopped. It takes me a long time to accept Facebook friends requests. I've got like about 350 waiting. And that's because if you actually want to add me as a Facebook friend, please send a little message at the same time, so that I know how I know you. And then I want to have that conversation. And maybe that goes back into the whole, we want to have a conversation, but then if we do that for everyone, if we put in the time that we think everyone's worth it, then at a certain point, I don't have time for all these people. But then that's not scalable. And then we have to be kind of selfish. We have to say, yes, I'm not going to listen to all your stuff, but I still expect to come onto your channel. I still expect to talk about my thing briefly. I still expect to tell you about my thing. And there's a little self-centered arrogance to that. Like the whole notion of a press release, the whole notion of streaming, frankly, like, I'm going to posit
look at
that
us. We're on TV.
I am going to say there takes a certain element of arrogance to be a streamer, genuinely, and I very much include myself in that. I believe that I've got a bit of an ego. I'm not going to, and like,
you've got confidence. You've got confidence, which is what you need.
No, it's not just confidence. Confidence is saying that I'm good enough. To me, the arrogance is saying that, and other people should be watching. Do you know what I mean? And it takes the arrogance to do the press release to say, yes, I'm good enough, but also you should be listening.
It is. And I think that's what I think, if we're talking about, so it's the arrogance to say, look, I think this is a good thing we've come up with. I think this is actually something that other people would like, because I don't really know what other people are going to like, but I'm here saying, actually, I think you'll like this. I think you should put us in your magazine. I think you should put us on your, your roundup of news. And, and that takes, it takes guts, it takes confidence. It does take that arrogance. I think, devil's advocate, if it was only about building relationships, supposing that things, then you'd basically, then we'd be saying that people who had less charisma shouldn't be promoting their games. Supposing it was only about, building relationships, then we'd be handing the ability to make games and to sell them to those people who had more charisma, which doesn't quite feel right either. So I think it's a really difficult balancing act.
Absolutely. And a lot of the people that I work with, I train them basically in order to talk better about their own games, like showing them examples of better ways to communicate with others, because they might not have necessarily that level of charisma and the arrogance to do it themselves. But they want to, but they just don't know how. So absolutely, yeah, it's not easy, but it is also, it's a skill. It's something you can practice and get a little bit better at. But some people are just naturally, has a naturally higher charisma than others, and you do see it in the industry. Obviously I'm here, so I've done something right in order to appear on the best show and start talking about marketing. So clearly, I must. Not necessarily only have the arrogance, but also, best thinks people should listen to me. That takes a lot. It's almost like an endorsement when you start talking about other people on the press releases and kind of hoping and expecting them to share your press release. It does come with, you are building upon other people's network in order to start sharing your thing, and that takes charisma. That's why writing the press release is so important. So it has the right tone and the right vibe to it, and that you're speaking the language of the audience that you're hoping to meet. And that is not the easiest thing.
That thing about speaking the language, I think, is really important, because, again, that's something where I need to shout out to Mill and say, my colleague Mill was so much better at that than I was. And that's probably because of what, where we've come from. So she is accustomed to promoting creative projects. Previously they were theatre projects, now it's a game. But I have come from a political campaigning world, so I've been accustomed to doing press releases and to giving quotes. Normally I didn't do the whole press release, I just did the quote bit, and I was normally ghosting for somebody else. Where the quote was quite often, we don't like this piece of legislation. We think this is bad because. So it's quite interesting to come from something which was a very negative spin, or sometimes a constructive criticism, saying, we think that amendment such and such should be put in because this. To come from that to something where I'm actually selling a product. It's a whole new world. There's something to sell. I'm trying to persuade people to, potentially in the future hand over money for something which we've made, and that is really weird to me.
Yeah, and the whole notion of, positive wording of everything that you're doing, to not use the word not, or anything negative phrases should be not in there at all. And leaving more open questions, not anything that can be answered with a yes or no. It's very different than politics, definitely. It's creating conversations on building a positive associations from the beginning, instead of this is work.
Rather than trying to give a nice quotable soundbite. So what I used to do a lot was come up with a 2-sentence quote. which would say, this is the thing, this is our opinion on it, which works really well with an idea, but doesn't work so well with a product, because you're trying to, like you say, you're trying to create a positive impression, and you're trying to get the product associated in people's minds and say, hey, we've got this cool new thing coming out, this is how it is. So yeah, it's a whole new world.
Just because Rob said arrogance is a very loaded term, and Alex suggested confidence, which I know that we already had this discussion on screen, and I don't want to turn this into a definitional discussion, but here's a definition from Collins English Dictionary, which seems like a very good English dictionary to my mind. And I think that, yes, there's definitely some, maybe I wasn't meaning the unpleasantness, but I can definitely see how the word unpleasant can be associated with arrogance. But there's definitely the second half, belief that you are more important than others. And I think there's definitely something of that in writing your press release. You have to say, hey, of all the things that you could give airtime to, my thing is more important than those other potential things. And here's why it is more important. I mean, let's ignore the fact that it's unpleasant, but that's the problem, isn't it? That you can't just chop and change and only use part of a definition of a word. If I use the word arrogance, people are going to assume that it means that I'm calling myself unpleasant, which I don't necessarily mean. But when I say I believe that the LDEC is going to be the best curated game system in the world, there's definitely, I don't know what to call it, because it's belief in the value of that thing over other things. It's not just, here's the definition for confidence. If a person or the manner is confident, they feel sure about their own abilities, qualities, or ideas. And I think it is more important, because you are saying this is more important than the things that you don't show. Let's say I were to review a lot of games. Let's say I started reviewing 10 games a week. Let's just pretend. And that's quite a lot, right? But then that's nothing compared to the number of games that are released every year. That's only 10 games a week. That's 520 games in a year. And so, how many games are released each year? Loads more than that. So if someone's sending me a thing and they say, hey, we want you to do one of these micro reviews, even if you're doing, and let's say whatever it is, that person's saying, hey, we believe that this game is more important than the games that you're not going to spend. I guess maybe this is it, because Rob says,
they require attention, yeah.
We're saying that it's more important than other things for your attention versus it is more important than you. And with my stream, I'm never saying that I am more important than you. I'm never saying that. Actually, hopefully Friendly Friday Forum illustrates that I do love people jumping on. And, if you want to jump on, you always can. And the fact that I have all these interviews, but there is definitely I am maybe less so with the stream, but I'm at least as important as all the other potential things that you could be doing with your time, which feels like arrogance is the right word, but do you know what I'm getting at?
There's a difference sometimes between what's intrinsically important and what's important right now, what's relevant. So, so I think that everybody, so every human being has the same importance. No human being is more important than another. But some of those human beings are going to be more important to me, because they're human beings I have relationships with. So my children are more important to me than other human beings on the planet. And that's, that's, I think, something that people understand. So it's so, so you'll be saying, yes, my game and my show and the product I've created is not more important, there in itself, but I think it's more relevant to what you're doing. I think it's more important right now to you. So that's like having somebody who's an expert. They're the most important person in that room at the time, but they're not more important, sort of there as a human being. They're not a more important human being. They've just got a more important role right then.
That makes a lot of sense. That it is all contextual, yeah.
That's what I'm here for, hopefully to make sense. Then someone's going to come along and go, nah, Jess, you're talking rubbish.
So, Jess, I mean, I expected us to be done with this at 11, but, it's been a good conversation, and I feel like all these tangents have been relevant. But let's get back into the success, because the big thing for you probably was the mention in Tabletop Gaming Magazine.
Yeah, we're on what is it? It's page 7, so it's after the the real, so you've got the page of contents, etc. And then we've got prime place, the odd number page, top of the page. I was so impressed, and I think that's actually because we'd been talking to people before about it. We'd been talking on Facebook about it quite a lot. So I think it's that getting the awareness out there, beforehand. So when the press release dropped into to the inbox, then they said, "Oh yeah, hang on, we know what that is. We've seen a few things about it. That looks good. Oh, plus it has a nice logo. So so it's all that sort of thing, which I think it's all coming together really. So really, I mean." So well done a little bit to me, well done much more to Mill for doing all of that stuff, and
of course, like
at the
we
right
want
timing.
to, and I really appreciate you. Of course, like how many people are involved? Is it 5 in your team?
5 is the team at the moment, but it fluctuates, it changes. We're trying to do it very much on a kind of cooperative model, as it were. So yeah, whoever puts in work gets some of the royalties at the end. We've set ourselves up.
And please, for those watching, and also just for the record, when I say you, I am talking about you, the Descent Games team. You're still branded as the Descent Games team, right?
Yeah, so it's being brought out through Descent Games, which I specifically set up a couple of years ago to be a not-for-profit company. So the company itself shouldn't really be making any profit. We hope to make enough money to actually pay ourselves something. That's the aim.
Can you talk about, so specifically with Tabletop Gaming Magazine, was it a BCC? Was there a specific cover form for this? And how did you introduce yourself?
So it was a BCC, but we had been in, but I believe we'd, contacted them already through various other things. And the key thing there, I think, was nothing to do with us. It was more luck that we that they came back to us straight away and said, "Hey, we've got these bunch of videos we're doing for the Tabletop Online, for the spring showcase. Would you be interested in doing one?" So we leapt on that immediately and said, "Yes, we'd love to do that." So that became more of a conversation. So I think that was what it was. That it was having that other conversation, having that that willingness, to say, "Oh, yes, we'd love to go in this other direction because this is what you're doing." But also, I think being able to respond, quickly, because there's nothing worse than sending off an email and then, people responding and then realizing that you haven't responded to their responses.
I guess that just shows the importance of establishing those connections before you send out things. And once you do already have that connection, then you can feel free to do the BCC, and people will understand the human data comes from, maybe.
Yeah, I think we started. So I think our Facebook group was, which was so the Facebook page. I think was we started that back in November. For this game, which is coming out in, which is going to Kickstarter in July. And we'd been talking about it with with other Facebook groups. I mean, we do use Facebook probably more than other things. We also use Twitter, but we use Facebook more than other things. And I think that probably reflects the makeup of the team, because most, not all of us, but many of us are, we're in our 30s. So we're that generation who are more Facebook led. So I think that that's where the Facebook heavy social media is coming from, just because that's what we use ourselves. But I think we've been talking to the teenagers from the Mary Seacole Trust, as I was saying, and they've been talking more about how we should do more on Instagram. So we have to do that too. Instagram is where we need to go next, because we've got some followers, we've got some stuff on there, but it's not really stuff that we're making the most out of.
And let's get to, Dina's wee bits of social media auditing in just a minute. But before we do that, Dina, do you have anything that you would like to say about press releases or comments on the way that Jess did things, or some general tips for people?
At least when you are doing a press release, add in all social media handles that you're expecting the audience to find you, so that they can easily follow you and find you on other platforms, because they might not make content for you, but they could also be potentially backers and supporters during your campaigning. Don't lose out on those people, because every bit helps, right? And we all know that social media tends to have like a 1.6, 2.6 an engagement. So adding in all those people from your press releases is going to help you in the end to have a lighter reach and get out to more people.
And I guess if you've got more than 4 links, maybe you need to put them in one of those Linktree accounts.
Definitely if you're adding them into a social media platform, but for an email, I think it's just fine to link them within.
Okay. And so that feels like a good wrap up for the press release section. And regarding the side discussion of arrogance, Alex says, arrogance is a mild form of megalomania. I don't think sharing something should make you mildly megalomaniac. I'm not convinced that I'm not, but I mean, that's up for debates, and it's a really difficult thing to tell, because an inflated self of self-importance, how do we even measure that? Because then we have to somehow get an objective sense of what your importance is before we can measure whether your sense of self-importance is appropriate, or whether it's too low, or whether it's too high, or whether it's just right. I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
What's a normal sense of self-importance? Regardless of what your importance is, what's a normal sense of it to have anyway?
At the point where it hinders a social connection, I suppose. That's usually like how the psychologist would rate it. If it is hindering you from creating genuine connections with other people, then you're having a problem.
I like that. It's like with alcoholism, it's not an issue if you drink a lot but at the point where you're drinking a lot and it's impairing your ability to do other things or to lead a healthy life, then that's incredibly problematic. Although arguably any amount of drinking is somewhat damaging to your body, but yeah, anyway. I would like to finish off with some, where's the banner? Auditing tips with Dina. Auditing tips, auditing tips, auditing tips, shooting from the hips with Dina.
Okay, so I have all of these auditing tips now on my website, marketingwithdina.com, on the blog there, but there's going to be more. So just like if people want to refer back to them, at least you know where to find them. Yeah. What sort of auditing would you want to start with, Beth? Did you have an idea? Or Jess, do you have any particular? Do you want us to do the social media accounts? Do you want us to do brand marketing audits or
do something about social media? Because earlier on, and I know Timmy was in there saying, "Oh, I don't know how to find people," and I'm just kind of plugging away, and I think I've done fairly well, kind of not spammed, but I'm sure there's lots of things that I could be doing better. So, I mean, the whole point of an audit is to just take a point to reflect and have a wee bit of a, am I doing the right thing? Am I not? Maybe I am, in which case, great. Maybe I'm not, but I don't have the time to do the right thing. And that's also okay. You don't have to be perfect in anything, but this is just something to consider. So let's talk about social media of building awareness.
Social media is great.
Yeah, I think social media is a brilliant thing. But obviously with social media, that is the key word in the beginning is the social. So the question is for the auditing, are you actually social on the social media? Are you talking to people or are you talking with people? Because anyone can schedule a bunch of text and throw up captions and just go okay, this is my content, and I'm kind of shouting it towards and hoping that someone's going to pick it up and think it's interesting. The other way of doing things is to actually engage with people in creating content and having your captions reflect the conversation that you're having with people. And by having more conversations with people, you're also giving them an opportunity to create content for you. For example, the press releases is asking people to create content for you. And in order to do that, there should be at least, basic level of communication. Yeah.
So what does being social entail? Did I actually send you this video where someone was having a big rant saying, well, you need to actually go on there and reply to people and listen to people. Did I send you this video?
No, you did not. I want to see that. That sounds great.
But it was someone saying, oh, this automated stuff, it's ruining social media. And people say, oh, I'm there to reply to people if they reply to me.
Yeah. Yes, I remember now. Yeah, I've seen that. That was a great one. Yeah.
And would you agree with that it's not enough to just automate and be there to reply to people? You need to be looking at other people, having communications without the expectation necessarily of them engaging with you. And what does that look like? I mean, for a personal account, presumably, where you're able to share your political views. I mean, I don't do this a lot on twitter.com/stuffbybed, but I would be ready to share, this is what my political views are, or share something that's politically inclined, whereas on ELL_deck, I would not want Chris to do that. I wouldn't want Chris to be saying, this is, I wouldn't want Chris to say, in my opinion, Trump is an idiot. Because even though I might completely agree, that doesn't feel like it's just turning people, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. There is a place and a time for everything. Yeah.
And that's an extreme example. But even if as soon as you're presenting your own opinion, there's definitely a risk of turning people off. Like if you say, and I think this is almost where it comes to making sure that you're generally more positive. Like Rodney Smith from Watch It Played is really good at this, at maintaining positivity. And like if you've got a game that someone's like, oh, I love Uno, I had so much fun playing this, I'm not going to tell them, oh, that I dislike that game because I feel like it drags on a bit at the end. I'm going to say, I'm glad you had fun with it. If I reply at all, that's all I'm going to say, because I am glad that people had fun with things, even if they aren't things that I personally enjoy. And I think there has to be some self-censoring, right? You can't just be social in whatever way. You have to be trying to lift people up. You can't be, but then if in a sense, if you try to be insincere, that's got its own problem. I'm not going to say, oh, that's a game I love, because that would just be, you know what I mean?
Yeah, ensuring a consistency in the way you're talking, and also, actually, if you're saying that you've played something, you should actually have played it, and engaging with the content on the level of where you are, and also, if it's possible, seek in more information if required for said conversations. Like, be upfront, like, I don't actually haven't played this game. It would be really interesting to play it. How does it deal with X, Y, and Z? And I always think the best way to do this is to always answer or lead with questions and ask questions wherever possible, because conversations can be boring.
The other thing I see, which I really like, and I don't know what your view is on this, Dina, but the other thing I see is when someone starts a conversation, but it's not really the start of a conversation. So they're riffing off something that someone else has done. So someone does a box throwy thing, and then, a day later, someone else will do a box throwy thing, and then a day after that, someone else will do it. And that feels to me quite nice, because it's clear that they're creating content for that because they've seen someone else do it, and it feels like it's a gentle way of having lots of conversations about the same thing, rather than necessarily thinking, oh, yeah, we've got to find something really original every time, because there's only so much original stuff, right?
Absolutely. And creating a trend is one of the things that we do in social media marketing. Make the content that you're creating, like the scheduled content when you're putting together graphics and whatever, make it as engaging as you can in order to create the conversation further, but also bring that conversation to others. So you would go to on the platforms that you're choosing, that you're most comfortable with, approach other people on creating similar or content based on your content. Like the Katja challenge a while ago, where you're stacking up the board games to see if you can meet your own height. That was popular because people thought it was fun, and they were also asked to do it on one of the board gaming groups that I'm in. And it would never have happened, and people would never really start talking about like how many games do you have if it wasn't for this. And it is not even Katja's thing. It was someone who was just like creating content based on something Katja had said, which is it's how trends are created. And absolutely, when possible, do this. For like Instagram always says like, for reals, you should always aim at doing this one thing, and is to try to create the next trend. And with box throwing, or in my case, I did the balancing board games that me and Bess has had a bit of fun with. It is, our take of creating a trend that is fun and light and easy for others to also recreate themselves. And it builds a community, and it also builds engagement, and it builds, conversations.
And you've said in the past a sort of 80-20 split is ideal, but when you've got something like the LDEC Twitter, when you've got something like Descent Games versus Quaker Descent, that's a very different thing. So, yeah, for the LDEC Twitter, I have asked Chris to make sure that each week's, spends half an hour or so looking through other people's things and doing a bit of a reply. But the most popular things are, it's very oh, that's not the thing I wanted to share. There, that's the one I wanted to share. So, yeah, which comes out every Wednesday is the Wibble Wednesday, and in it say, can you think of a word that uses one letter from each card? If you're just starting off, try using the top 4 cards. If you want a bit of a challenge, try and use all 7 cards. And so that's something that, yes, it's getting other people, and Chris is getting quite good at when people reply to kind of have a wee reply and a conversation, but it is still very self-centered. I'm not going to lie and say that's inherently social. And so where, especially on an account that's a brand account, essentially, how do you make that line?
Yeah, I think this is a great example of people creating from a brand account engaging content, because it's asking the audience, like the call to action here is to engage, not to go somewhere to sign up. It's not inherently self-serving in the sense that it is actually allowing other people to create a conversation around the answers, and you're having a follow-up and you're being really diligent on replying, and that there's a communication going back and forth. It's not something that is like, I'm just asking you to answer this so that I have content for next time. It is something that kind of lives on, and I've seen this conversation from some of the answers that's happened from this account kind of fall into other places as well. So that's a good example of engaging content. And it does not fall under the 20% self-serving information, like, okay, give me something in return.
Okay, so that 20% that you're talking about is something where the call to action is, hey, please sign up, or please buy this thing, or please...
But also, yeah, another example is there was a tweet from this account earlier where they were asking, like, what would you do? Like, what category would you create for this? And that is one of the 20%. I'm not sure how many replies it received, but I remember seeing it.
I mean, the interesting thing is that for that account specifically, because it is all anything that doesn't come out on a Wednesday, the main tweets are scheduled. So the actual questions which aren't to do with the game, which is, hey, which one would you rather live in, a zoo or a theme park? Or what did you want to be when you grew up? Did your expectations match reality? And then Chris says, yeah, Chris genuinely wanted to be a race car driver. And it does say at the top, the tweets mainly by Chris. There we go. It's like 99% by Chris. I hope that, but interestingly, people don't engage with that as much, maybe because it's, whoa, I need to give more of myself to answer that question. That's almost, or maybe it's also, hey, this is a question I've answered many times before. Maybe I'm not that into it. But like with the zoo or the theme park, it's like, what does that even mean? I try to have a stab at answering these things because obviously I've got the interest. But it's interesting how the thing that people really seem to get excited about and engage with are the things where it's a relatively simple, hey, what words can you make using these things? And there's a little puzzle where you maybe feel a little bit of cleverness or you've got something going on. And
yes, exactly, because it's giving a reward back to the people who are engaging with the content, while as the one with the zoo is more, it's just there. It's something to reply to. It's not necessarily a good conversation starter. Well, as if I get to have an instant gratification of, hey, I managed to fit together all of the cards, I'm feeling pretty good about myself, and it's going to fall the rest of my day because I did a thing. Look at me. Well, as me answering about what sort of animal I would be, this is the kind of content you see a lot on the different platforms, and it kind of spills into all over the social medias. And they're not, while they are interesting, and there are definitely new and good takes of these questions, it is, it's requiring a little bit more, and it's more for talking to people than it is to talk with people.
So it feels like the nuance of how you're talking to and with people is very variable, but the key takeaway from this auditing tip is how much are you talking at people, how much are you asking them to do, versus how much are you giving them something that might be just a joyful thing. And if it's like, hey, here's a little mini game that I've constructed, then that's something that are able to enjoy, and that's a little bit less self-serving than hey, here's a picture that we just painted for our thing. But even that is a little bit less self-serving than, hey, please sign up to our mailing list, or please go here and watch this video.
Yeah. So I'm taking away that actually having a little puzzle works really well. So saying, oh, right, what can you make with these letters? That's a great one. So if there's something where, you said, Dina, I think that there was a, that there was a feeling of a reward back from it. You solved it. So now I'm busy thinking about what little puzzles I can do. Because I know, because actually for us, I think it would be quite easy to create big puzzles. We can quite easily have something where it's like, here are these, these monsters. Which characters can get past them? But that's quite a big thing, and we've done a couple of those, and people liked them, but you didn't really reply much. So maybe it's just you've got a monster. Which character can you think of out of your head who can get past it?
Or, how would this heroine defeat said monster? You could make it even as that small.
Yeah.
What trick out of the sleeve? Yeah, what trick out of the sleeve is John Derek going to pull in order to take this monster down? I mean, that one is interesting because everyone has an idea of who John Derek would be. So it's easier to engage with, or you're lowering the threshold while you have a really big puzzle that requires a lot of, I need to stop what I'm doing and focus. I'm going to think about it a little bit. Maybe it takes me 15 minutes and I have a reply for you. And that's it. I'm not necessarily going to feel awesome about it because, I did a thing for you and it feels like work. Well, as, having a little mental exercise and lowering the thresholds for engaging content.
Yeah. No, I can see that. Right, I'm going to go away and think about these. I've been inspired to go away and think about what what we could say there.
I think talking about puzzles, I did give a little bit of criticism to Z-Man. It's formerly was from Zev Schassinger. Are responsible for pandemic, and then they have this puzzle of, hey, how do you beat this thing? You can actually make it so that you cure this disease by your next turn. And I looked at that puzzle, and so many of the cards were covered in the text, and I should be able to at least gain the information for this puzzle. I know the rules of pandemic. I'm not asking them to reiterate all the rules of it, but I've played through Pandemic Legacy. I've played basic Pandemic, and then all the cards that they had, I saw, okay, that's a card I've never heard of. It's probably from some expansion. I actually looked it up on the internet, and then, okay, that's other cards. I've never heard of that. Let me double check that. And by, it was so much to keep in my head. And I said, hey, please, why not have between the presentation of the puzzle and then the solution, why not have another page that says something like, okay, this is the cards and here's what it says in plain text, because some of them were just too small. I couldn't zoom in enough because it's too low resolution. And sorry, this sounds like I'm being incredibly negative, but what I'm saying is basically make sure that it's as accessible as possible, because look, Z-Man can get away with this. Let's be honest. There's a big following of Pandemic, and I saw that at least a good few people, maybe they had 16 people who'd all engaged with this puzzle. But if instead of it being, you need to know all these cards, if it had been, okay, here's all the cards, it's going to be more accessible, and maybe even having, some reminder of, this is how it works, or not for a first-time person. I'm not asking you to reiterate an 8-page rule sheet and get something like that. But if it was you've got 4 actions per turn, because I can't remember, is it 3, is it 4? That's the kind of thing that I need to double-check. And so just a quick, okay, here's what you do, and then maybe they would have had hundreds of people kind of all enjoying this puzzle. And for the LDEC thing, I try to help Chris, a lot of the Monday, Wednesday, and Friday things are written by me, but then Chris does the Tuesday and Thursday and all the replies. And then the Monday and Wednesday and Friday things, try to make it so that someone reading it for the first time understands what they have to do. And I think that's more critical for a game that doesn't already have the audience, because if people for the first time can't understand it, who are you even appealing to? But then when it is a little bit of a more complicated game like Library Labyrinth, because Library Labyrinth, it's not like Quibble. You can't just say, I mean,
find these letters. Yeah, it's not this. Yeah,
you can't just say, what's a word that you, what did I actually write? Can you make a word using at least one letter from each of the top 4 cards? Add any extra letters you want. If you're feeling ambitious, try using all 7 cards. Don't forget to let us know what you come up with. And that's like one turn of the game. It's clearly laid out. I feel good about that. But then when it comes to Couple, which is another game in the LDEC universe, and I've been thinking about this quite a bit, how am I going to do that? And that feels almost more like I'm going to have to do it like a chess puzzles type thing. Like they are going to take a lot more crafting. It's not just a case of, okay, here's a random thing and what's the best thing that you can... It's not got to
people need to know where they're coming from at the beginning. You know, you can't just sort of drop someone in the middle of it. You know, they need to know how, you know, what it looks like. With chess puzzles, there's a standard way of doing them already, which people already know. So it's much easier. The same with crosswords. You know, so when you say something is a cryptic crossword, then people know what you're talking about, and they know whether they like it or they don't.
I guess it's really all about designing these things. So shout out to Alex, and I don't know if this actually works. Aqua, is there some sort of yeah, there we go. Aqua Sulis is awesome. But there we go. Just Alex has actually came up with this new puzzle that we're going to bring in on Friday. And because Fable Friday just wasn't that interesting enough, to be honest, and so we've kind of taken it away. We can always bring these things back, but it's like, how do you present something so that it's accessible? Because a chess puzzle, even for someone who knows how to play chess, isn't accessible. A crossword, even for someone who has gotten an A in English at higher, isn't necessarily accessible. You've got to do a lot of work to even start doing your first few things. And I guess that's the way, because with accessibility, it does help us become more social. And I'm sorry that I've not let you two speak as much as I had hoped. And please do feel free to interrupt me if you are ever on again. But I feel like this is the point where we should start wrapping up. But is there anything... Oops. So what have we talked about? We've talked about mountain goats. We've talked about Dragons Wild. We've talked about bikes being brilliant. We talked about press releases for quite a while. We talked about... Before that, we talked about food and Don Air, which is some sort of thing, and making food with your parents, and what is a donor to you, and what would you put on a plinth. Press releases, we decided it's about sharing info and a point of view, which is really interesting. Dina mentioned the who, what, who, when, and where, and of course, it's also the why that really matters. It's why are you doing this? Why is it important? And this is such a deep question, but the more simply you can answer that, the better. Why does it matter? Why should they care about it more than caring about another press release or another story that they've not heard of? And in a sense, the fact that you've sent them the press release, at least it's accessible. At least you're making it available for them if they want it. But there has to be a bit of... We talked about the arrogance, confidence, what that even means. Arrogance maybe being me versus you, but there's something else which is saying, hey, my thing is more important than these other things that you're not necessarily covering, which is a slightly different discussion, but there's still... There's just something to unpack there that I think it's going to take years for me to really work out in my mind. We talked about it being contextual. Like Jess said, if you are the expert about wine at a wine tasting ceremony, that means that you are kind of more important, that you should be given more time speaking than someone who's won the Nobel Peace Prize for whatever, because frankly, it's a wine tasting ceremony. Who cares about you know what I mean? Like, it's not that, but talks about having that conversation with Tabletop Gaming Magazine. You did just BCC it, but it kind of works because that's turned into the conversation which you then had a genuine back and forth. And once you know people, you can have some affordance that you don't need to feel like you have to really delve too deeply, and you don't have to listen to everything from someone, but at the same time you have to pay a little bit of attention, and it's finding that balance. That's the skill. Make sure you have all your links on press releases. If it's in social media, then use the link tree, Dina says, but if it's in an email, if you've got 15 links, then share those 15 links. Or am I... Feel free to respond. And
I mean, you would have the important ones like Kickstarter preview link, your Instagram, your Facebook page, or group, not both. Choose where you want to actually have the people conversation. You know, like website is obviously important, but 15 links is a little bit too much. I say max 5 if absolutely necessary. Like if you are on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit, and you have actually your own subreddit, maybe include that, you know, and your Facebook, your website, and that's going to be it. Plus your Kickstarter. So.
And maybe at the bottom for the final one, you can have link tree to not overwhelm them. Or would you just ignore the other things?
It would have to be based on importance and relevance.
Okay.
I say that, I wouldn't include more than 5 links. I don't think it would be relevant for the conversation, but I'm sure that could happen. In that case, I would have probably the rest of them like on the website, like press or coverage, and that could be sorted somewhere else.
That makes lots of sense. And so, for sure, there's the sense of prioritizing it. And we talked about different types of messages where Jess was, Mill, is it Mill? So Mill was doing some work with theatre. And so it's kind of like the sense of, okay, there's one audience, the theatre press people. And there's this other audience, the gaming people. And gaming people, you have a very similar message, and maybe it works to have all these people in one press release and you explain to them why it's important in this way, and then there's a slightly different story. So maybe for gaming people, it's like, hey, there's a game, but these are the things that make it a different game. It's about, it's feminism. It's about, showing these literary heroes for what they are. It's about bringing all these people in a celebration of all this world. Whereas for the theatre production, it's like, okay, we're going to... These people that have worked in our community are now going into a board game, so maybe you've got to play up the theatre angle a bit more. But the final bit that we had was the check-in with, are you being social on your social media? And if you want to do a little bit of spring cleaning, if you want to be doing a little bit of auditing, are you being social? Are you actually engaging with people? And that is all we talked about.
Yeah, and primarily, for engagement, stick it around the time of your posting for the best amount of reach. It's always the best way to do it. So,
if you have enjoyed this show and if you want to check me out on other places, talking of more than 5 links, stuffbybez.com, stuffbybez.bigcards.com if you want to buy stuff, twitter.com/stuffbybez, instagram.com/stuffbez where I share pictures. You know how Instagram works. Twitch.tv/stuffbez where you're probably watching. That's the best place to watch live. 10 a.m. UK time every day. YouTube.com/stuffbybez for all the old episodes, and stuffbybez.com/discord. This is really the biggest one. If you join one of the links, basically join the Discord to talk about cats, to talk about game design, to talk about all that good stuff. So those are my links, and if you have enjoyed the time with these wonderful guests, then let's start off with Jess, because yours is just slightly higher up. So please remind us.
So do come and say hello. So we're on Twitter as Descent Games. There's a website which is descentgames.com. We also the previous game was called Disarm the Base, so there's a website for that, which is disarmthebase.com. The current game, which we're busy doing, which is the one we're really excited about, that's librarylabyrinth.com. So do come and find us. We're also on Facebook, although we haven't put a link there, but just search for Library Labyrinth on Facebook. We're fairly easy to find. Just come and say hello. Come join the conversation.
And Dina.
Yeah, I'm trying to make it easier for everyone to find me as wherever they want to have a conversation with me. Accessible and availability is kind of like what I'm doing. So Dina said so on TikTok. Dina said so with a 1 at the end because Twitter is being annoying with me, and Instagram is also Dina said so. And for those who are wanting to have like my resume and stuff, LinkedIn has all of that with a bunch of links of all the stuff that I've been doing. And also for working relations, Zero Time One for Hero Time Management also has me listed for helping out with Kickstarters.
And I would like to say a massive thank you to everyone. Firstly, of course, thank you, Dina, and thank you, Jess. Thank you both for giving me your time and coming here and joining in this conversation. Part of the reason that I do this, I hope it's like, yeah, it is for the social contact in our current socially deprived world where we're not able to run around and speak to whoever we want in the pub. But part of it is also because I found myself very much learning and continuing to learn from people, and it's so wonderful to have these conversations and trying to work out what you mean, what I mean. Like maybe I'm saying the wrong words, like probably I might not use the word arrogance in future, because yeah, it's good to challenge me on these things, but also hearing about what other people did well, sharing those successes, learning from each other. And so this is fantastic. And of course, everyone who's been watching, thank you so much. Whether you're now lurking, whether you've been chatting along the way, and just lots of love to everyone. It has been a lovely show. And as I always say, I want to ask you over to you. What are you up to? You can share anything you want to. So after this show, what are you going to be getting up to? I'm going to be probably doing a wee bit of writing for a couple of hours and then stopping, and then after that, just doing a bit of reading. I'm currently, last night I started the actual book of Alice in Wonderland. I've got a plastic bag as a bookmark. So this is both the books together, and it's just such a lovely story. So now I'm using a book as a bookmark.
Of course. Why not? A book as a bookmark is the best.
So that is what I am up to. Dina, what are you up to?
I'm going to pick up my kid very soon, so I'll be getting ready for that. And after that, today I am working for the project of Kickstarter, which is a project together with Ori Kagan and Joe Slap, where we are helping people who have Kickstarters who have failed and wanting to relaunch their campaign. So we're helping out a client there in order to see what can be done better next time, so that people can prepare better. So that's been a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to digging into that. More auditing happening.
Nice.
So I am, well, now I'm probably going to go and look at all my social media platforms and see what I could do better. But I'm also going to be looking at creating some lesson plans, because one of the things that we've been talking about with Library Labyrinth has been whether we can make lesson plans for schools based on some of the characters. So I've got a couple of conversations lined up with people I know. One of them is a friend of mine who lives just a few streets away, who has been a teacher and is a special educational needs expert now. So I'm going to talk to her about lesson plans and, how you do them and, how we could do this, because that could be really interesting. It could be a really good way to spread this game wider.
Oh, absolutely. That sounds amazing.
Sorry, I am going to be trying to, remove a couple of obligations for myself for the next couple of weeks. When I say next couple of weeks, I mean next 10 days, and make that clear to a few people. But I am going to be back, of course, tomorrow for a stream. Tomorrow is going to be possibly quite a quick, friendly Friday forum. Saturday is going to be the first episode of Discussing Media Making, where we're going to be chatting about motivations. We're going to be discussing motivations in media making with Anna Vassenberg from Budget Spelling, Antoinette Mason from Board Game Inquisition, Matt Warwick from The Offline Gamer, and Dutch Yoda from Dutch Yoda Plays. And so we'll be talking about why we do it, how we got into it, and then I've got Idle Michael's stream on my calendar. If you check out this stuffbybed.com/streams, I'll be reviewing some books and meeting Flavian and discussing integration of arts and graphics and playing some balance, doing all sorts of things over the next week. Check it out if you want to know what's coming up. Share, spread the word. And at this point, I am going to read Idle Michael, who seems to be chatting about IdleCon 2, so that's quite a lovely person. If you are here, then please copy paste this raid call and paste it into the chat when we head over there. And that is the end of the show, unless you have any things that you would like to say at this point. You don't? In that case, the only thing left to say is bye, bye. Bye, bye. This is a goodbye song. Do you want to sing it? Bye, bye, bye.
Bye. And thank you for watching along.
Bye, bye.
Bye.
This is the end of the show.
Bye, bye. Bye, bye. And now it's time to go.
Bye, 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 bye.
This is the goodbye song. Bye, bye. Bye.
Thank you for watching along.
Bye.
Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. And bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye bye, everyone. Bye bye, Rob. Bye bye, Alex. Bye bye, Dina. Bye bye, Jess.
Bye, Jess.
Bye bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.